Ah ha ha! What it do, P-Town crew? And welcome to today's video. You read the title, you saw the thumbnail. I am doing a tier list of Dustin Poirier's fights in the UFC. So I know that UFC 291 is farther away than UFC 290, but I decided as a part of the lead up, I want to go ahead and make a tier list commemorating the career of arguably my favorite fighter of all time, Dustin Poirier, where I rank all of his fights in the UFC on a tier list, at least in my opinion. So I'm very excited for this fight, or not this fight, this video, because I keep repeating it. I just fucking love Dustin Poirier, and I just want to make a video encapsulating his UFC career. And yeah, so this is a tier list where this is just my opinion on how much I personally like each of these fights. And yeah, we're gonna have to go ahead and rate these tier lists from S to F. This is just my opinion. I'll pretty much be ranking these how enjoyable these fights are as fights. If I have to weigh in on certain performances, I'll go ahead and make that distinction. But otherwise, this is just my opinion. And before I get into this video, are you a Dustin Poirier fan? Have you seen any of his fights? Go ahead and leave some of your favorite Dustin Poirier fights down below. Give me your favorites from him. And so yeah, let's just hop into this. Starting with his UFC debut, Dustin Poirier versus Josh Grispi. I'm gonna go ahead and put this at a B tier. I think that this is a pretty nice introduction to Dustin Poirier early on in his career. It showed that he's a pretty well-rounded fighter early on. He's more known as a boxer now, but when you look at his early fights, he's very well-rounded. He dominated Josh Grispi pretty much everywhere. He pretty much stunned Grispi with striking, and then any moment that Grispi attempted in terms of submissions, otherwise neutralized by Poirier, and Poirier still got lots of control. Just a very well-rounded performance. Impressive introduction to him. And so yeah, we're gonna move on to Jason Young, the next fight. I'm gonna put this at D tier. This is a pretty boring fight. It was a pretty meh performance from Dustin Poirier. He kind of ate a lot of leg kicks, which you'll see multiple times throughout his career. He wasn't nearly as defensively responsible, especially in round two. In third round, he didn't really have any offensive moments, just a lot of control time. It was a pretty boring fight. Once again, D tier because it wasn't really the best performance from Poirier. Good fight, decent fight. He got the win, but yeah, not the best showing. All right, moving on to the Pablo Garza fight. I'm gonna put this at C tier. I'm gonna put this at a C tier. You know what I mean? It was pretty competitive. It was competitive on both sides. Garza had some output as well. Good offense on the feet and on the ground. It was a pretty slow second round until Poirier got the finish. But yeah, he got the finish with the Darce choke. You know what I mean? And here's one thing I have to say. What's the deal with the meme of Dustin Poirier's best submission being the guillotine, in which he's never actually submitted anybody before? Like the Khabib fight has kind of ruined that for him. It's like why? Oh my gosh, why did Dustin Poirier go for the guillotine? It's supposed to be his signature submission, but it didn't even work on Khabib, and he got submitted like 10 seconds later. So I don't get it. Like this, like if you look at Dustin Poirier's submission wins, none of them are for the guillotine. Okay, and if we're talking the UFC, his signature choke is the Darce choke. Like I don't know where this what Mandela effect came from, where like people believe that the guillotine is supposed to be Poirier's signature submission. Like it's not. I guess as a meme, right? It's like, oh, I think the commentators said like, oh, this is a signature submission and it's never worked before. I don't think that was ever the case. It was never the case. But anyways, a C tier. Good finish from Poirier, but not really the best fight. Not the worst, but definitely some better down the line. Coming up next, we have his first fight against Max Holloway, a win that has aged very well. I'll put this at C tier as well. Maybe if I'm putting the tiers in order, I would do this. Great performance from Dustin Poirier. Pretty much submitted Max Holloway right away within the first round. Once again, demonstrating his well-roundedness. But it wasn't really that good of a fight because it wasn't competitive. It was a quick finish, which did demonstrate Poirier's well-roundedness, but otherwise not really that good in of its own. It has aged well since both these guys went on legendary careers. But otherwise, not really that entertaining because it didn't really have enough time to get going. Okay, up next we have Dustin Poirier's first loss in the UFC versus Chan Sung Jun, the Korean Zombie. This is an A tier. This is a great fight. I know that this is entirely my opinion, but as far as fan reception to this fight, you might not see this fight often in people's top 10 lists for greatest UFC fights of all time, but some people have said that this is a pretty underrated pick for, among the greatest fights ever. Maybe not the first one you think about, but a really great fight. And here's the thing. It's not an S tier. It's not because of any reason that Dustin Poirier brought to this fight. Korean Zombie neutralized Poirier fucking everywhere, dude. Dominated this fight. I mean, was this a fraud check for Dustin Poirier, right? Like already, like 1, 2, 3, 4 fights in the UFC, very well rounded. His first main event. Like, was Dustin Poirier fraud checked here because he had nothing to offer for the Korean Zombie? Um, couldn't get any shots on the feet. Any shots he did get in was just either eaten by the Korean Zombie because of his tough chin, but otherwise he didn't hit Korean Zombie that much at all. Any offense that Poirier attempted on the ground, Korean Zombie was like, yeah, about that, and this reverses position. It's a very exciting fight because of the reversal moments and the changing of tides. But I guess what I mean by changing of tides, it's not implying that Poirier had any momentum at all. This was just a one-sided beatdown for the Korean Zombie. A great fight, but I guess the only thing holding it back is just because Poirier didn't really do much. But otherwise, A tier. Great fight. It has aged pretty well. So moving on, Dustin Poirier bounces back with a good win against Jonathan Brookins. I'm gonna put it at B tier. This is a pretty good fight. This was kind of the first small glimpse that we had of Poirier being a diamond in the rough. You know what I mean? Earning his nickname. Brookins came out in this fight, swinging a bunch of bombs, and Poirier was eating a lot of good shots. But we see that Poirier wears the storm. Not wears, weathers the storm pretty quickly. Um, it takes Poirier little time to kind of gain his composure under pressure. He unloaded his signature Cajun flurry of punches to hurt Brookins, knocked him down, and secured the submission within the first round. So pretty good performance, nice bounce back. And, I do like this fight because, once again, we have seen Poirier become that diamond in the rough that we've seen. He's great under pressure. And this is kind of the first glimpse, not the best glimpse, but definitely the first one. So yeah, B tier. Next fight is his loss against Cub Swanson. I'm gonna also put this at a B tier as well. Not the best performance from Poirier, I guess, amongst these other B tier picks, but it was a pretty entertaining fight. Dustin Poirier lost. It was his first time dealing with a very unique and dynamic fighting style such as Cub Swanson. You know what I mean? I think when it came to his first time fighting someone with a unique, unorthodox style, he just couldn't really get any success in. Cub neutralized everything, whether or not it was on the feet or on the ground. Swanson either always countered or always reversed position. Poirier couldn't pull ahead on neither the feet nor hold down Cub, and otherwise he couldn't really adjust and read Cub Swanson, and Cub Swanson got the pretty dominant and comfortable unanimous decision. So, but pretty decent fight because Cub Swanson is an entertaining fighter. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Next up, we have Dustin Poirier's fight against Eric Koch. I'm going to also put this at a B tier. This could have been higher, as it did had a very, very fun opening round. Poirier was able to knock down Koch twice, and he nearly finishes the fight with some nice ground and pound. And then Koch, was still in it, attempts a Hail Mary submission triangle. Poirier then eventually locks up the Darce choke once again, but Koch is saved by the bell. And so it was a pretty good opening round, but it kind of fell to a slower pace in the remaining rounds. I think they kind of emptied the gas tank earlier on. But otherwise, a pretty good win for Dustin Poirier. Still comfortably won everywhere else. B tier because it was really good in the beginning, but it's held back because of its slower pace later on. So B tier. Next up, we have his fight against Diego Brando. I think this is a pretty underrated fight in Dustin Poirier's fight record. I'm gonna put this at an A tier. If I were to put a tagline on this fight was one of those. It was a war for as long as it lasted. It was great for as long as it lasted. Both fighters came into this fight headhunting, exchanging in the phone booth. Both were stumbled during exchanges at different points of the only round that this fight took place in. But then ultimately, Poirier, takes down Brando a couple times, lets him get back to his feet, and eventually slugs him out for this finish. It was just a very good war. Could have been better if it just lasted longer. But like I said, it was just kind of that lightning in a bottle fights. Great fight. I think underrated in Dustin Poirier's resume. Not going to be one of his best, but one that I enjoyed from start to finish. Because like I said, it was great for as long as it lasted. Next up, we have Dustin Poirier's fight against Akira Corsani. I would put this one at A tier as well. This was also a great fight, better than the Diego Brando one. I think that the Brando fight's underrated, but the Corsani fight was a better fight. It was just a back and forth dog fight. Lots of exchanges on the feet, hard, clean shots from both fighters landing, lots of swinging, lots of landing. Even Poirier almost secured submission at the end of round one. And but in the second round, Poirier just immediately walks down Corsani. Gives him that signature Cajun two-step combo and finishes it by the second round. right? Was it the second round? Yeah, it was the second round. So pretty quick fight. Another lightning bottle. Just an arguably better one, just because more chaos that lasted longer. Great fight. Great fight. All right, next up we have one of Conor McGregor's toughest losses. His first fight against, or not Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier's first big losses against Conor McGregor, in F tier. You know, I have no slight or ill will towards Conor McGregor. I understand that there's a strong divide between Conor McGregor fans and Dustin Poirier fans. People love to bring up this fight when under Poirier's post. As a fight, it wasn't really that entertaining just because it wasn't competitive. Conor McGregor took little time in reading Poirier, kept the offense up, kept the output up. He was the only one with any offensive output. Finished Poirier pretty easily in the first round. It was a great performance from Dustin Poirier, but otherwise, as a fight, because Poirier got finished like that, I'll have to put it in F tier, as a fight. As a performance, great performance from Poirier, and once again, or not Poirier, from McGregor. Once again, no ill will towards McGregor. It was a great performance. But as a fight, not one of his best. Okay, so moving on, Dustin Poirier bounces back with a beer tier fight against Diego Ferreira. This was his lightweight debut. He moved up after this. Poirier was like, okay, I need some chin back. I'm gonna put on some pounds again. Let's use that chin. It was a pretty good performance from Dustin Poirier. He reverses any takedown attempt or cage control Ferreira threw at him, reversed it, got back up quickly with his newfound power at 155. He just kind of decided it was time to go home in the first round, and then just cracks Ferreira with the Cajun combo, the Louisiana Cajun combo of elbows and punches to get the finish in the first round. Good performance, a nice bounce back. I'll probably put it higher if I'm putting these tiers in order. I'll probably put it somewhere there. I guess we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that. You know what? This was good. Yeah, okay. So yeah, B tier fight against Diego Ferreira. Nice introduction to lightweight with a nice knockout finish. Okay, so next fight is against Yancy Medeiros. I'm gonna put this at C tier. I'm gonna put this at C tier. It was a good fight because it was a finish from Dustin Poirier, but otherwise it ended within the first couple minutes of the fight, and it couldn't really get interesting. You know what I mean? The main moment in this fight was the finish. So other than that, not really a fight that I really go back and rewatch. It was a great finish from Poirier, especially if you like your first round finishes. But otherwise, a fight as a whole, yeah, it wasn't really much of a fight. So I'll have to put that C tier. Just because I found these the B tier fights still more entertaining because they lasted longer, win or lose. So yeah, C tier for the fight against Yancy Medeiros. Coming up next, we have a dominant fight against Joseph Duffy. I'm gonna put this at D tier. This was one of Dustin Poirier's most boring fights. Aside from a few moments of like a hard check hooks landed on Duffy, this fight took place entirely on the ground. It was a phenomenal performance from Dustin Poirier. Joseph Duffy had nothing to offer on the ground. Poirier just held him down for 15 minutes straight. But grappling's only really, in my opinion, grappling's only really entertaining if it is competitive. And in this case, it was not competitive. Joseph Duffy just had no ground game. Poirier was like, okay, I'm getting some free points right here, just holding Duffy down. Let me just do that for 15 minutes and just get the win. And, he did what he had to do, got the win. But yeah, this is definitely a boring Dustin Poirier fight. It could have been worse because it could have been a boring fight and Dustin Poirier gets finished and loses. But because it was a dominant performance that he won, I think that's saving it from being F tier. Next up, we have Dustin Poirier's fight against Bobby Green. Knockout win. Um, we'll put this at a B tier. Even though this fight couldn't really get started that quickly or that much, it was entertaining for as long as it lasted because Bobby Green has such an entertaining stand-up style. So I like his style, but Bobby Green just ultimately gets knocked out. Good performance, good fight for as long as it lasted. Not comparable to like the mini wars that we had, some of the mini wars we had up in A tier, but a good fight, good performance. Yeah, Bobby Green. And then next up we have Dustin Poirier's fight against Michael Johnson. This is an F tier. Only time that Poirier has ever been knocked out cold. Yeah, it's just a tough fight to look back on. If you're a Michael Johnson fan, this is definitely a great performance and a great fight to look back on because Johnson was the underdog in this fight. People were still saying that, he's a contender, right? Potential contender, potential future champion, right? And yeah, Johnson just knocks out Poirier cold. So great performance from Michael Johnson. But yeah, as a fight that ended the first round with the Poirier knockout, can't really consider the fight that entertaining as a whole. So yeah, F tier because Poirier got finished. No ill will towards Michael Johnson, but yeah, as far as a Dustin Poirier fight, not the one that you'd recommend for people to watch. All right, next up we have Dustin Poirier's fight against Jim Miller. Poirier was like, okay, I need a little buff. All right, what's the buff going to be? The buff is going to be in the form of him growing out his hair. So Poirier gets the hair growth buff. You know, steps up a level, steps up his blocking, steps up his game, and gives us a really great fight against Jim Miller. This is an A tier. Banger fight. Banger fight. Jim Miller is also a pretty entertaining fighter. This is kind of the first real instance of the Diamond moniker coming to fruition, where we see him under pressure, where we see Dustin Poirier hurt, and for him to dig down deep and still pull off the win. Poirier took some of the most damage from a fight he's ever taken with Miller's hard leg kicks that Poirier was not really checking at all. He could barely walk at the beginning of the second round after just a couple leg kicks. But then despite that, Dustin Poirier was still able to plant on his punches and swing those Cajun combos. All right, hit him with the Cajun two-step, pull up his shorts, fix his hair, and then just unload on Miller in that second round. Banger second round. These two fought inside the phone booth, landing exchanges and counters, all while swinging big. And then Poirier ultimately maintains his composure and took the decision despite being on his Captain Ahab shit. Okay, walking on one leg. Despite being on his Captain Ahab mode, he still took the win in an awesome, consistently entertaining fight. Great fight. I could argue that this is probably higher than the Korean Zombie fight just because it was a Dustin Poirier win. But you can't say that the Korean Zombie fight had its more chaotic moments and a finish, which is more satisfying. But yeah, these two are great fights. A tier for sure. Jim Miller. All right, coming up next is the first Eddie Alvarez fight. I mean, okay, hold on. With Dustin Poirier growing out his hair, Dustin Poirier would go on his legendary Hall of Famer worthy title run. He was on his BMF shit from going from an unranked Jim Miller, and now I'm not putting down Jim Miller, but he was unranked at this fight. Going from an unranked Jim Miller to fighting the former champion Eddie Alvarez, who's only coming off of one loss to Conor McGregor. Like that is some BMF shit right there. And I know that McGregor made Alvarez look like he had no business being champion, but he was still dangerous. He still finished Rafael dos Anjos in like the first round. But as far as this first fight goes, it's a C tier. I think we all know why. It was a very disappointing conclusion. Dustin Poirier had a great first round, a lot of momentum, was hurting Alvarez a lot, but of course a disappointing ending with Alvarez shooting up that illegal knee to grounded Dustin Poirier. And it sucks because it was a great performance. To going from an unranked fighter to a former champion, a recently former champion, is crazy. He had Alvarez, he stuck Alvarez hard and even froze him up at some points. And it just sucks that the fight ended this way because Poirier smelled some blood in the water. This could have been a finish. But, hey, C tier because of the disappointing ending, but a good performance from Poirier. And like I said, this is the start of a legendary run. And that legendary run continues with Dustin Poirier's fight against Anthony Pettis. This is an A tier. Another great fight. This was Dustin Poirier's turn to neutralize anything that his opponent threw at him. All right. Poirier was having flashbacks to the Korean Zombie fight. He's like, I got to neutralize another great fighter. All right. I need to neutralize a fighter everywhere, on the feet, on the ground. That's what Poirier turned in with this amazing performance. Thanks to Poirier's upgraded chin at lightweight, Poirier's able to eat some of the decent shots that Pettis landed. And I mean by some, as in like Pettis only was able to land some shots. Otherwise, Poirier just walked Pettis down with great shots, kept getting back up whenever Pettis tried to level change, and then just punished Pettis for anything Pettis threw at Poirier on the feet. There's some furious exchanges throughout the fight that Poirier always got the better of. It does suck how the fight did end early due to an injury, but based on how the fight was going, Poirier would have likely gotten the finish eventually. And whether or not it was through TKO finish or that cut was still bleeding a lot, so maybe the doctor might have stopped it. But a great performance from Poirier, great fight. Once again on his BMF shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right, next up. Oh, the fight, the sequel fight, or I guess the sequel to this fight is the reason why this video is made. The first Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. This is the first S tier of the video, boys. This is arguably my favorite Poirier fight. Just the pinnacle of violence. I know that the War Room was on fire when they put together this matchup. Two violent motherfuckers coming in to get in a car crash. Pinnacle of violence. You have Dustin Poirier, who has a high work rate, lots of power, cardio, and great combos, versus Justin Gaethje with heavy hands and some great aggression. This fight was just constant slamming of fists and legs. And watching this fight just kind of felt like an ongoing car crash. You know what I mean? If I were to put a tagline to this fight, this would be like the war that just kept on giving. You know what I mean? Maybe not a lot of moments of just chaos of like, oh my gosh, he's hurt. Oh my gosh, he's down and stuff like that. But just tons of great shots landed on both these guys. The war that just kept on giving. A very close fight too. I'm not here to give my prediction yet on who would win the rematch. Porier versus Justin Gaethje 2 at UFC 291 for the BMF belt. But this was a very close fight. And I think that this next fight's going to be great too because it's so competitive. This first fight is just so amazing because it was so competitive. Constant violence, constant damage. Both fighters hurt each other multiple times throughout the fight, and it was very, very close too until Poirier got the finish. And this was also one of the examples of just a great finish from Poirier. He just hits him with the Cajun two-step, pulls up his shorts, after he counters, like, "Yep, you're dead," and then finishes Justin Gaethje. Great fight overall. I love this fight. This fight has aged so well too. One of my favorite fights of all time. All right, coming in the rematch to Dustin Poirier versus Eddie Alvarez. Time to wash off that bad taste that disappointing ending had. This is an unpopular opinion, but I'm gonna put this fight as an S tier. You know what I mean? You can make an argument saying like, "Oh, Preston, you put other fights pretty like in C tier because the fights couldn't really get going. This fight ended in the second round." Here's the thing: this is like my favorite finish from Dustin Poirier. This is arguably my favorite finish from him. You know what I mean? Um, the moment that Dustin smelled blood when Alvarez was rocked in that second round with that knee and check hook. All right, Dustin just seemed to land at will. Anything that Dustin threw at Alvarez in that fight ending finish just landed. Okay, Poirier's just teeing off on Alvarez. He was mixing up his straights. He was mixing up his hooks, his knees. His knees in the clinch. He even threw in like a sloppy head kick throughout the middle. All right, like Poirier really pulled up on Eddie Alvarez in the second round. He's like, "All right, I'm about it." He's like, "You just hit me with a 12-6 elbow. That was another illegal move. I'm not gonna let you end this fight again. I'm gonna end it on my terms. I'm gonna hit you with the Marvel Infinite, dude." Poirier just pulled up on Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and just hit him with the Marvel Infinite in that finish. I fucking love that finish. And specifically, there's this cool moment that despite Poirier unloading on Alvarez, Alvarez just kind of throws this Hail Mary counter, and Poirier just slips and ducks it so easily despite being in the zone with that finish. Oh, man, I love this finish. This is my favorite Dustin Poirier finish. So, yeah, I'm biased. This is my list, okay? This is what I think of the fights, not what everybody thinks of overall. This is an S tier in my opinion. This is my most watched Dustin Poirier fight because it is my favorite Poirier finish. We move on because I talked too long. Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway 2. This is another S tier. This is also arguably my favorite Dustin Poirier fight. I don't feel like we as fans deserve this fight. I mean, two fighters, great fighters, potential Hall of Fame worthy runs at this point. Both in their primes. Max Holloway, the current featherweight champion, it was just such a high pace, high level, high output war. The two guys with great striking, cardio, and toughness. All right. And, both fighters were able to mix up their shots and combos so well. Such a high output. Each fighter had multiple moments in the fight where they just unloaded each other. This fight had numerous exchanges and numerous counters. And, in my opinion, a lot of people have the fight before this, Kelvin Gastelum versus Israel Adesanya, as like one of the greatest fights of all time. You know what I mean? Everybody loves that moment where Izzy's kind of going into the fifth round. He's like, he can't beat me. I'm prepared to die. Right? In my opinion, I preferred this fight and the moment that these two guys had before the fifth round, where Poirier just gets up from his stool early, points to the center of the octagon, and Max Holloway obliges him. All right, that's just such a gangster BMF moment that I just prefer over the Kelvin Gastelum versus Izzy fight. This fight didn't have the chaos that the fight before it had, but just had the high level output from just two great fighters. Highly competitive too. A 49-46 for Poirier is kind of crazy. I probably would have had this at 48-47 for Poirier, but otherwise, just a phenomenal fight. One that's aged so well. Amazing fight. One of the greatest fights ever, in my opinion. One of my favorite fights ever. We move on to the Khabib fight, D tier. Don't think I have much to say. It hurts watching this fight. You know what went down. I mean, if you know that Khabib is 29-0, you should know that this fight ended in a loss. Poirier got finished. Yeah, sucked to saw. But and if we even look at it without the finish or without the loss, it wasn't necessarily that entertaining. Looking back, so yeah, probably a D tier. But I don't want to stay on that for too long. I've talked long enough. Moving on, Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, another S tier fight. Violence. This fight was just complete bananas. If I had to put a tag on this fight, I would just say bananas. All right. And this is one of those fights where you can actually see the charm of having fights held at the apex because you could hear every hard shot that landed. I know that people say, "Oh, that person was throwing bombs in a fight." Like these strikes sounded like bombs, okay? Round 2 was one of the best rounds of 2020. This fight had a lot of back and forth danger, a lot of violence, and there's a lot of chaos too. The technical violence at display, you know what I mean? There's the chaos in round 2. You know, um, Poirier just, split Dan Hooker open. Dan Hooker almost finishes Poirier in the second round. If he had 10 more seconds to work, that probably would have been a finish for Dan Hooker. And then Dustin Poirier, diamond in the rough. You know what I mean? He's great under pressure. He's able to dig down deep and take those final 3 rounds to get the decision. I think that Poirier lost those first 2 rounds. He needed the last 3 to win it. And I think he took it with mixing up his shots, mixing up the wrestling. Great technical performance too afterwards, but otherwise just a completely bananas fight. S tier for sure. All right, up next, his rematch against Conor McGregor, A tier. And I have this at A tier for different reasons that you might think. Poirier was the underdog in this fight. You know what I mean? Both Poirier and McGregor had both had a lot of success up at this point. But going into this fight, McGregor was the favorite. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, McGregor mollywopped Poirier the first time they fought. You know what I mean? He's just going to do it again in this fight. And the first round was competitive. I had that first round to McGregor. He got the cleaner shots, right on Dustin Poirier's chin. Outside of Poirier's leg kicks, McGregor definitely took the first round. But then Poirier invested in those leg kicks, hurt him bad, and gets one of the most satisfying finishes that I've seen of Dustin Poirier's career. With so many people betting against him, right? I don't know the big odds, but I know that he was the underdog. But, and being the underdog to get that finish the way that he did, the first and the current only person to finish, to TKO Conor McGregor, excuse me, to TKO, not to finish, but to TKO Conor McGregor, it's just such a satisfying finish, you know what I mean? With McGregor being such a big star, right? And just, Poirier being counted out. I just love this fight because of that. Just such a satisfying finish. And I don't really go into too much detail. Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3 was a C tier. Disappointing finish. It had some exciting moments in the first round, which Poirier dominated, by the way, on the ground. But, a fight to end in an injury like that, without feeling conclusive, yeah, it just kind of sucks. And, it definitely hasn't really aged well. I think since then, McGregor fans have definitely been at Poirier's throat because of this fight and his reaction. But, I'm not here to comment on the fallout of that fight, but I guess you could definitely say this is a C tier because of it. And yeah, don't really have much else to say. Um, Dustin Poirier versus Charles Oliveira is a B tier. You know what I mean? This is definitely one of the higher ranked fights that Poirier loses. If we look outside of Poirier losing the fight, this was pretty entertaining. You know what I mean? Poirier had the obvious power advantage. He was tagging Oliveira a lot on the feet, knocking him down multiple times. Oliveira was able to come back and take that second round pretty comfortably and then get the finish in the third. If you look outside of the finish, right, this was able to last long enough to get a pretty interesting fight, a back and forth competitive fight. And yeah, probably a B tier, because it was actually pretty entertaining. I do think that if they were to fight again, I do think that Poirier definitely can win. He was doing very well in that fight. It was just Charles Oliveira's night. But I do like the competitiveness. And so, yeah, I have to put it at a B tier despite him losing. This is, one of the few Dustin Poirier UFC losses I'll put at a B tier, pretty much outside of the higher one, Korean Zombie. And yeah. And last but not least, we have the most recent fight, Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. This is an A tier. Not an S tier, in my opinion, but also one of Dustin Poirier's best fights. Super competitive, super back and forth. Agonizing to watch as a Poirier fan and watching it live. Watching that competitive first round in which Michael Chandler pulled ahead pretty much consistently, and then watching that flash knockdown from Dustin Poirier and almost finishing Michael Chandler, right, in that excellent, potential round of the year. It wasn't my personal round of the year for 2022, but one of the best rounds of the year. And then to watch an agony as Michael Chandler dominated Poirier on the ground. Some people had it as a 10-8 round for Michael Chandler round 2. Third round, Poirier needed to finish, pulled it off in excitement, reverse Chandler's position, first person to submit Michael Chandler. Great fight and a great comeback win after the Oliveira loss. And there you have it. This is my tier list of Dustin Poirier fights. So if you have your favorite fighter, go ahead and leave your favorite fights from them down below. Do you agree or disagree with my ranking of Dustin Poirier fights? Which fights do you have higher? Which fights do you have lower? If you would like me to do a video where I go over your favorite fighter and rank their fights on a tier list, I'd be happy to oblige if you request it. And yes, I will also be doing a follow-up sequel video where I rank Justin Gaethje's fights in the UFC. So that should be fun. Go ahead and comment your favorite fights. Subscribe down below so that way you can don't miss that video when it drops. And if you do have a request for a fighter you want me to cover, thank you for your patience in advance. But go ahead and leave me your favorite fights from your favorite fighters down below. That's it for y'all. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.